In Mansfield Park, Edmund Bertram occupies a complex and pivotal role, both as a moral compass and as a character who undergoes significant self-deception and ultimately achieves moral clarity. As the second son of Sir Thomas Bertram and a future clergyman, Edmund is portrayed as a figure of integrity and duty. However, Jane Austen uses this character to explore the limits of virtue when it is compromised by affection and idealism. Through Edmund, Austen examines themes of morality, gender, vocation, and romantic blindness. Though he is often overshadowed by the more obviously flawed or vibrant characters, Edmund's inner conflict and delayed growth are essential to the novel's moral architecture. Narrative role. At the beginning of Mansfield Park, Edmund is positioned as Fanny Price's only friend and moral support. Unlike the rest of the Bertrams, who treat Fanny as inferior, Edmund treats her with kindness and respect. This early bond forms the foundation of Fanny's emotional dependence on him and her growing admiration. For much of the novel, Edmund acts as her protector, helping her feel valued in an otherwise cold and hierarchical household. Edmund is also meant to represent clerical virtue. His decision to enter the church aligns with Austen's recurring interest in vocation and the importance of principled clergymen in English society. However, Edmund's moral perception is repeatedly clouded by his infatuation with Mary Crawford, a witty and charming woman whose values are often at odds with his own. This contradiction drives much of the novel's dramatic tension and reveals the limits of Edmund's judgment. His gradual disillusionment with Mary defines his character arc. Initially, Edmund sees her as someone he can influence or reform. He believes that her irreverence and moral ambiguity are superficial, disguising a deeper, more authentic self that matches his ethical outlook. This misjudgment reflects Edmund's naivety and emotional idealism, traits that Austen critiques gently but firmly. Only after Mary reveals her true character, particularly in her response to the scandal involving Maria and Henry Crawford, does Edmund finally recognize the incompatibility of their values. In the end, Edmund realizes that the woman who truly understands and shares his values is Fanny. His romantic shift toward her, while sudden to some readers, is not presented as impulsive, but as the result of growing awareness. He does not fall in love with Fanny in a passionate sense, but comes to see the depth of her character and the steadiness of her affection. These qualities contrast starkly with Mary's brilliance but moral flexibility. Symbolic significance. Edmund is symbolic of both the potential and the peril of moral authority. As a clergyman in training, he is supposed to embody the moral and spiritual ideals that Austen valued in religious leadership: humility, principle, and sincerity. In many respects, Edmund does uphold these virtues. He is thoughtful, earnest, and concerned with the welfare of others. He defends Fanny when she is ill-treated, shows concern for his family's behavior, and holds a relatively progressive view on women's education and inner worth. Yet his susceptibility to Mary Crawford's charm symbolizes the fragility of virtue when confronted with allure and social polish. His attraction to Mary blinds him to her moral shortcomings, especially her cynical views on the church and her worldly pragmatism regarding marriage and propriety. In this way, Edmund is not a static moral paragon, but a figure whose internal contradictions must be resolved before he can fulfill his symbolic role. Moreover, Edmund represents the limitations of patriarchal systems in recognizing women's true worth. He does not initially see Fanny as a viable partner, despite her apparent moral and emotional depth. This blind spot underscores the broader societal tendency to overlook quiet virtue in favor of outward glamour and wit. Only when Edmund moves beyond the superficial markers of desirability does he become capable of genuine moral insight. Broader implications. Edmund's vocation as a clergyman anchors one of the novel's central concerns: the role of the church in an increasingly secular, performance-oriented society. Austen, the daughter of a clergyman herself, was deeply invested in the spiritual and social role of the clergy. Through Edmund, she explores the challenges of upholding clerical integrity in a world where many view the church as merely a career path rather than a calling. Edmund's defense of the church during his conversations with Mary Crawford is telling. Mary mocks the clergy as idle, ineffectual, and tedious. Edmund counters by insisting on the dignity and moral influence of the position, arguing that a good clergyman can do real good in his parish and must act as a moral exemplar. This exchange becomes a microcosm of the novel's broader critique of modernity and moral relativism. In gendered terms, Edmund also serves as a foil for Fanny. While he enjoys the privileges of education, status, and inheritance, he remains emotionally and morally dependent on others for clarity, especially on Fanny, who often sees the truth before he does. Austen employs this dynamic to critique traditional gender roles subtly. Although Edmund is the more powerful figure socially, it is Fanny who embodies wisdom, restraint, and perceptiveness. This inversion highlights the value of emotional intelligence and quiet integrity over socially sanctioned forms of power. Edmund's disillusionment is swift but significant. Austen uses this moment to reinforce one of the novel's key messages. Character cannot be altered by affection alone, and true compatibility must rest on shared values, not just attraction or social polish. Conclusion. Edmund Bertram is a character defined by moral aspiration, personal blind spots, and eventual self-reckoning. Though he is positioned early in the novel as a moral exemplar and Fanny's protector, Austen complicates this image by showing how even the virtuous can be misled by charm and desire. His journey from infatuation to insight parallels Fanny's growth from dependent cousin to moral anchor. Edmund's final recognition of Fanny's worth is not merely a romantic resolution, but a moral awakening. Through Edmund, Austen critiques superficiality, idealism, and the limitations of social privilege, while affirming the enduring value of inner principle and emotional truth. His development underscores the novel's central concern, that real virtue may be quiet, but it is indispensable in sustaining both personal relationships and social order.